The 19th of July, 1973, a man walked onto the set of Enter the Dragon and never walked off. Not the way he came on, anyway. His name was Raymond Chow, not the legendary producer, but a different man entirely. A stuntman, a brawler, and a skeptic. He was a man who had spent 15 years convincing himself that the little dragon was nothing more than a meticulously crafted export, a shiny illusion sold to a Western public that didn't know real kung fu from a stage play. He was catastrophically wrong, but by the time the truth hit him, it wasn't just his pride that was shattered. Raymond didn't vanish into thin air or end up in a scrap heap like a character in a noir film. What happened to him in the sweltering Hong Kong heat of 1973 was far more quiet and far more permanent. It was the kind of conclusion that never reaches the tabloids because the witnesses were too stunned to speak and the studio brass had every incentive to keep the details under lock and key. This is the sequence the film editors cut. This is what happened when the lights were dimmed and the reels stopped spinning. This is the chronicle of a man who looked at the greatest martial artist in history and uttered the one sentence you never say to a master: "You're nothing without a camera." Bruce Lee didn't explode. He simply smiled, and in that smile was a silence so heavy it chilled the marrow of everyone standing in that courtyard. To understand that summer in Hong Kong, you have to understand the tension of the city. It was a place vibrating on a frequency of change. The British still held the paperwork, but the triads held the docks, and the film industry was a gamble played with borrowed time. Then there was Bruce. He was less than 2 years removed from the big boss in Fist of Fury. He had just finished Way of the Dragon, and now he was the center of a Hollywood-backed juggernaut. This wasn't just a movie, it was a battering ram that was going to smash the doors of global cinema off their hinges, which is precisely why Raymond hated him. Raymond's birth name was Chow Kin Man, the man who endures. It was a name meant to be a blessing, but for him, it became a grim prophecy. Growing up in the rough-and-tumble markets of Kowloon, Raymond learned a binary truth. The world is made of those who take and those who are taken from. He chose to be the former. He wasn't a student of the way or poetic forms. He was a product of back alleys and rooftops, where the only rule was being the last one standing. He entered the film industry because it paid well and didn't require a resume. For 6 years, he was the guy who took the falls, the body in the crowd, the nameless face charging the camera. He was good, but he lived in a world where remarkable was always someone else. He carried a simmering resentment for the stars until Bruce Lee returned from America. The first time Raymond saw Bruce move, it wasn't during a shoot. He was peering through a gap in a partition wall, expecting to see a pampered actor. Instead, he heard a sound he couldn't identify, not the thud of a choreographed punch, but a literal hiss of air being displaced. Bruce was practicing, alone, no audience, no lens. What Raymond saw defied his understanding of anatomy. Bruce moved with a velocity that felt like frames were being deleted from reality. It wasn't just the speed, it was the intent. Every twitch of a muscle served a surgical purpose. It filled Raymond with a sudden violent rage. He realized in an instant that no amount of street fights or stunt work would ever bridge the gap between his thug style and whatever Lee was doing. To Raymond, Bruce Lee wasn't just a better fighter, he was a different species. He decided then and there to find the seam. Every legend has a weakness, a point where the myth meets the man. Raymond spent 4 months maneuvering himself into the production of Enter the Dragon, playing the part of the indispensable, invisible worker, just waiting for his moment to strike. The first contact happened in the 3rd week of filming, in the stone corridors of the fortress. Raymond was part of a group meant to be swept aside in one take, but instead of following the script, Raymond lunged with a real, unchoreographed strike. Bruce didn't even blink. With a movement so infinitesimal it was almost telepathic, he redirected Raymond's momentum, sending him crashing into a stone wall with bone-rattling force. No one called it out, but Bruce looked at him, truly looked at him. The next morning, Raymond arrived at the studio at dawn, hoping to catch the real Bruce Lee, the one without the performance. He found him in the rehearsal hall, sitting in total stillness. No weights, no shadow boxing, just a man, like a stone at the bottom of a river. Raymond, who believed silence was only for the dead or the defeated, found this stillness terrifying. It had a physical weight to it. "You're early," Bruce said, his eyes opening with surgical precision. Raymond tried to play it off as professional zeal, but the atmosphere had shifted. For the next few weeks, a cold war brewed on the fringes of the set. Raymond watched Bruce like a general mapping enemy terrain. He watched how Bruce treated the lowliest crew members with genuine respect, a trait Raymond assumed was a PR stunt, but slowly realized was authentic. It made him hate Bruce even more. Bruce had everything: the money, the fame, and an internal peace that Raymond had spent his life trying to find at the bottom of a bottle or the end of a fist. The explosion finally happened on a Thursday afternoon. The set was empty due to a lighting glitch. Raymond was struggling with a spinning kick, his own bitterness throwing his mechanics out of alignment. "Your weight is too far forward," a voice said. It was Bruce, offering a genuine correction. For Raymond, this was the final insult. He turned and spat the words he'd been holding. "You're nothing without a camera." The air left the room. Two other stuntmen in the corner froze like statues. Bruce didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He simply smiled, that private, knowing smile, took off his shirt, and stepped into the center of the room. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. The fight lasted exactly 40 seconds. Raymond would later count those seconds while lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't a fight because a fight requires an exchange. This was a monologue. Raymond attacked with 40 years of accumulated resentment, a strike that should have put a man in the hospital. He hit nothing but air. Bruce didn't just step aside. He seemed to exist in a different relationship with time itself. Raymond felt 2 points of pressure, not even strikes, but corrections, and suddenly the floor was rising to meet him. Bruce crouched beside him, his voice calm. "Your weight was too far forward," he repeated. No mockery, just the same truth he'd offered before the fall. Then he walked out. Raymond Chow lived until 2004. He spent the rest of his life as a quiet man in a small apartment overlooking the harbor. He had outlived the legend by 30 decades, but he never forgot those 40 seconds. When his landlady found him, he looked like a man who had just finished a very long race. On his desk was a single photo from the set of Enter the Dragon. Bruce Lee caught in mid-motion, a blur of human potential that the camera couldn't quite sharpen. On the back, in Raymond's handwriting, were 4 words. He was right. Carry on. Raymond had spent his life believing that greatness was a lie we tell ourselves to excuse our own mediocrity. He died knowing that greatness isn't a story, it's a direction. He had looked into the sun, and while it blinded him, it finally showed him the truth of his own shadow.